Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to follow the entire life of a single share of stock. From the very spark of an idea all the way to a sale. We're going to uncover what it really means to be a corporate owner. So let's start with this. You own a share of stock. Okay, sounds simple, right? You own a tiny slice of a company. But what does that actually mean? Legally, what are your rights? What are the risks? What's the reality behind that piece of paper? Well, let's dive in and break it all down.
All right, first things first. The journey of a share, it doesn't actually begin with a stock certificate or even when you hand over the cash. Nope. It starts with a really powerful legal act called the subscription. This is the moment a share is truly born.
Now, don't get hung up on the name. You can call it a purchase agreement, a subscription, whatever. The law cares about what it is, not what it's called. And what it is a firm, legally binding commitment to buy shares. It's kind of like a pre-order that you absolutely cannot back out of. And trust me, that has some huge implications down the line.
So, this initial promise can sometimes create a bit of a showdown. Imagine there's a fight over who really controls the company. Which document do you trust? Do you go with the official birth certificate, the articles of incorporation where all those first promises were made? Or do you trust the company's internal address book, the stock and transfer book? Now, that book is considered prima facie evidence, which is just a fancy way of saying it's assumed to be correct until someone proves it's wrong. So when these two documents disagree, which one wins? Well, a real court case gave us the answer. There was this huge disagreement. The internal book said one thing, but the foundational document said something completely different. And the Supreme Court's ruling was crystal clear. The Articles of Incorporation, that birth certificate, is the ultimate source of truth for who the initial subscribers are. The internal roster is important, for sure, but the foundational document is the law. Okay, so you've made this binding promise. What does that actually get you? Well, the moment that subscription is made, a whole world of power unlocks for you as the subscriber. And this right here, this is the part that blows a lot of people's minds. Even if you haven't paid a single cent yet, you are considered a full-fledged stockholder. From the second you subscribe, you get to vote, you have a right to any dividends, and you have the power to look at the company's books. Your ownership and all the rights that come with it starts immediately. And if you think a company can just weasel its way out of this, think again. Look at the Ensign case. Here you had a corporation trying to argue that some people weren't really stockholders because they didn't have a physical certificate yet. But the court basically said, hold on a minute, the company had already let these people get elected as directors, and you have to be a stockholder to be a director. So the company was estopped, meaning they were legally blocked from denying what they had already acknowledged. It just proves that ownership is a legal fact, not just a piece of paper. But you know how it goes. With great power comes great responsibility. That subscription isn't just a promise to buy shares, it's a very real debt that you now owe to the corporation. And it's a debt that has some pretty serious consequences if you don't pay up. And you absolutely cannot just wish this debt away. In one really interesting case, a board of directors actually tried to forgive a huge unpaid balance for a major stockholder. They just said, we'll just reduce the number of shares you have. But the court slammed the brakes on that immediately, calling the whole thing void. Why? Because it violated a core principle that protects not just the company, but everyone it does business with. And that core principle is called the trust fund doctrine. Here's how to think about it. All the money promised to the company for stock subscriptions is treated like a trust fund. And that fund is held for one primary reason, to pay the company's creditors. It's their safety net. So the company can't just forgive that debt, because in a way, it's not really theirs to forgive. It's there to protect the people the company owes money to. So what happens if you just don't pay? Well, there's a whole formal process for that, and you can remember it with the letters CNDS. First, the board makes a call for payment. Then, they send you an official notice. If you ignore that, your shares become delinquent. And the final step? Sale. Your shares get sold off at a public auction. It's a pretty dramatic end to your ownership journey. All right, so let's assume you're a model stockholder, you do pay up, and everything's good. Then you finally get the physical proof of your ownership. Let's talk about that all-important piece of paper, the stock certificate. There's a really key rule here called the doctrine of indivisibility. And it's simple. It's all or nothing. You can't pay for, say, half of your subscribed shares and then ask for half of your stock certificates. Nope. The corporation will only issue that certificate once the full subscription amount is paid, plus any interest or expenses. It's all about ensuring the financial integrity of the company.
And what if you lose that precious certificate? Man, that's a hassle. There's a whole formal process for that too, which you can remember as APON. First, you have to file an affidavit of loss. Then you have to publish a notice about it for 3 straight weeks. After that, you have to wait for 1 full year, just in case someone else finds it and tries to claim it. Only after all that will they issue you a new certificate.
This brings us to the final stage in our share's life. It was born from a promise, its owner got all their rights, they paid their dues, and now it's time for that share to find a new home.
Now, transferring a share is basically a 2-step dance. To make the sale valid just between you and the person buying it, it's pretty simple. You just endorse the certificate, sign it over, and deliver it to them. But, and this is a big but, for that transfer to be recognized by the corporation and pretty much the rest of the world, there's one last critical step. It has to be officially recorded in the company's stock and transfer book.
So let's just quickly recap the absolute must-knows from our shares journey. First, your rights as an owner kick in the moment you subscribe, not when you finish paying. Second, if there's ever a fight, the company's birth certificate, the AOI, is the final word on who the original owners are. Third, that unpaid subscription is a real debt and it's protected by the trust fund doctrine, so it can't just be erased. And maybe most important of all, remember that ownership is a legal status. The certificate is just the proof in your hand.
So there you have it. From a simple promise, through a whole web of rights and responsibilities, all the way to a new owner. The life cycle of a share is a really powerful story. It's what makes the entire corporate world tick. So the only question left to ask is, now that you know what's really involved, are you ready to be an owner?